Hello and welcome to Energetic Media. Today I've got a great guest. It's Glen Jeffery, the professor of neuroscience at the University College of London in the UK. We're going to do a deep dive into red light therapy, what red light does, early morning rays, lights from incandescent light bulbs, how it moves through the body, helps your mitochondria, improves your eyesight, and other things. It's an exciting episode. Hope you enjoy it. It's a great pleasure to have you. Could you tell me where are you located right now?
I'm at University College London, in London, UK, and I'm at the Institute of Ophthalmology, which is a research institute within UCL, and we are directly linked to Moorfields Eye Hospital, which they tell me has the largest ophthalmic outpatient population in the world. No idea if that's true or not, but there's certainly lots of people walking in and out.
And so you studied philosophy first, did you? Or no, you got a biology degree first, a science
No,
biology?
I got my first degree was in experimental psychology.
Okay.
That was a long time ago, and it was a time when experimental psychology was a lot of physiology and a lot of kind of stats. But that was my first degree. But I took a big interest in visual perception. And that was kind of my route from there on inwards. I did my first degree was at Sussex University. My doctorate was at Oxford. I spent far too much time subsequently in Oxford. Small amount of time in Chicago, and fundamentally, I'm now back in London. My job is great because I don't have to do too much teaching and I don't have to do much admin. So that's where I am now, and that's the pathway that I've followed.
And so do you do lab work as well?
Yeah, I do. I do lab work. I work on. Uh, I've been pretty diverse. I've bounced around quite a bit. A lot of my stuff has been on, basically that kind of stuff people do with sort of mice research. But then, feeling a bit frustrated with that, I branched out into working in with flies and bees because you get very, very large populations very easily. And then we've got into a state now we're almost fully translated. So I would say 95% of my research is using humans or working with humans as much as possible in natural environments as opposed to artificial lab environments. But to be honest, if I see a handle that can be used to answer a question, I won't worry too much about the method. I'll just sit down and learn it.
Oh, neat. So, um, what sparked my interest was some of the work you've been doing with understanding what happens when humans and mice and basically all animals get exposed to these red light rays, which often we get are most beneficial to get in the early morning or late in the evening, and how they go through the body and actually charge the mitochondria in some fashion. So maybe if you could explain that.
Yeah, I mean, the key point to pick up with first of all is what are mitochondria? And remember, I'm not a biologist, so for initially that was a bit of a challenge for me. But mitochondria fundamentally provide all the energy that we use to perform our daily lives. We use mitochondria to kick our feet out of bed in the morning, get dressed, go to work. They provide the petrol for physiological performance, and they do that with a substance called ATP. And we make our own body weight in ATP every day. I mean,
Yeah, that's amazing.
it's a vast turnover.
And we
Um,
recycle it, right, as well.
yeah, we recycle it. We recycle it. And there are two key things about mitochondria. The first is that they regulate our pace of aging. So as we get older, we make less ATP, we've got less physiological performance. The second thing about them, which is really critical, is that they respond to light. And this was really, this was very new about ten years ago, and wasn't very appreciated. And within this environment, we noticed that, or we others as well noticed that red light, deep red light, sometimes beyond your range of visual perception, um, stimulated the mitochondria and improved the performance. So if we see mitochondria as a battery, which is my analogy for them, it recharges the battery. However, if we expose mitochondria to deep blue light, and one of my issues is that blue light is found very prominently in LED lighting, we discharge the battery. So we've got less power, we've got less physiological function. So we can tune mitochondria optically. So if we've got very old animals like old flies, if we expose them to long wavelength light, deep reds, we improve their mobility, we improve their lifespan. We cut out a lot of middle-age deaths. And in humans, if we give humans long wavelength light, we certainly improve. I'm in ophthalmology, so all my toys are visual. We certainly improve colour vision, and we do it it's a marked improvement as well. And the older you are, the better the leverage we have over that problem. So I work on mitochondria. They regulate our lives, but we can regulate them with light. And I think that's the important point.
Yeah, it's amazing because it doesn't, getting exposure to red light, then it's not just about stopping a decline. It actually is regenerative. Like we're seeing improvements in vision if you start exposing yourself to red light therapy, like getting up in the morning and getting exposure to the sun early, like at sunrise. It's good for your eyes.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I kind of react a bit about the word regenerative because it seems to carry a lot of weight with it. But you're
Yeah.
right. Okay, so I can take your performance in terms of your color vision, and I can reset it back to what it was maybe 5 or 10 years previously. Um, and we can, if we're talking about the animal experiments, we can improve the mobility of flies and bees, and we've done this um, very markedly in old animals, taking them back to a stage where they were much younger and their performance was much better. So yeah, we can do that. I mean, my target in life is to squeeze these lights into nursing homes. That's where we need to be.
So could you explain that a little bit more?
Well, so when we find as we age, we become less and less able physiologically. Our mobility is reduced, etc. And we know we can use deep red light to improve these functions. We can improve the mitochondria, we can improve the ATP, we can improve the physiology. So where do we need to be? Where we need to be is in places like nursing homes, where people
Mhm.
are reduced mobility. Generally your physiology by the time you're in your 80s and 90s, possibly also me, I'm just 70, can be improved just by changing the lighting. And it's not only there. So we now have our lighting units in a major stroke unit in a London hospital. And we're negotiating putting them into critical care units. So, for instance, if you come in after a road traffic accident, and you're in that situation, your mitochondria might be very threatened, or you have pneumonia where your mitochondria might be very, very threatened. Changing the lighting may have a profound effect on your outcome. So there's lots of little
And so you're
places where we get in.
so would you say your lighting, you're talking about red light panels that are powerful that you're
You
using for
don't need.
therapy?
Okay, so certainly it's not mine. I mean, there's a whole research field involving different people. They're not mine. I think the idea of lots of energy is really wrong. When you look at panels on being advertised, they're saying, our panel is super powerful, the rest of it. You don't want super powerful panels. You don't need them. Okay. The energies that we get effects with now are actually really quite low. If you use the right wavelength, the long ones, which is where we've just sort of published, they go through your body. You don't need them to be powerful. And I've always thought that you really shouldn't pump energy into a body unless you need it. So let's think about what is the energy of those longer wavelengths in sunlight? Can we find that and get a number fairly close to it and use that? These big panels pumping out vast amounts of light, they're inappropriate, really.
And so, what about over the years I've seen different technologies for the home, and even for I remember looking at it for as an investment because there was people coming up with these panels that you put on your roof, like a solar panel that takes in light and then directs it into fiber optic cables that then brings natural light. You actually run these cables through your house. It's quite expensive, but it brings natural light into your home. Would that actually transmit the long wavelength light, or do you think it would get lost in translation?
No, no, I think there's no reason to believe why that shouldn't be beneficial. So we can talk a lot about different devices, their prices, their energies. At the end of the day, I'm saying to most people, keep your credit card in your pocket. Go for a walk in the park at the right time of day. You've
Yeah, get up in the
evolved.
morning. I mean, there's all the other benefits that go with that, right?
Yeah, you've evolved for millions of years under sunlight. Go get it back. Because by living in the built environment and living under LED lighting, which has got no infrared in it whatsoever, you're being robbed of something that for millions of years you've evolved under. In fact, we talk about our evolution over millions of years. Life over billions of years has evolved under sunlight with its long wavelengths. So I'm I'm not going to financially help the people making panels.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I still think that there's a major implications for this for the education system, especially, how do we design, you look at I always bothered by school lighting. The fluorescent lighting in the 70s when I was going to school in early 80s, like it used to give me headaches. And,
Mm.
just, I think that and then the office environment are two, we spend so many hours under these types of lighting. And I think that we could do a lot to improve people's focus, attention, concentration, and health as a result.
Totally agree with you. You walk into different environments and people have got different perspectives. We work a lot with architects now. I think we work a lot with architects because they're beginning to get worried that they're going to get prosecuted for putting up buildings that are detrimental to people's health. But they also have got a different perspective on it, which is worth paying attention to. So they say to me, well, okay, what you're going to talking about is going to cost money, but at the same time, how many lost days are you going to retrieve in people's health by changing the lighting? Some people really react badly to fluorescent tubes and to LEDs. So I think that in the equation, we should talk about bigger issues of public health and what that can save an employer in terms of, days lost. So, yeah, I really agree
Well,
with you about schools and the
so
office
a, cou-
environment.
so a couple of things. One, I guess just I wanted to go back. I made a note here. Obviously, when you focused on the eyes, and so the mitochondria gets charged up, it does a better job. It's healthier, it's stronger, it can do its job, but not just in absorbing light and processing the information that we're taking in, but perhaps, and I'm just theorizing here, the muscles in the eye will have greater strength and more power so that you'll have less fatigue. And I went to my optometrist recently, and my prescription for distance changed. I actually have improved my vision at distance, but I lost a little bit on what's up close. And it might be in part because I've been spending a lot of time getting up in the morning and also going fishing and looking, long distance,
Mm,
straining
mm.
my eyes, trying to see the birds.
Yeah,
And he explained to me that as we age, the like glaucoma, and you get like a hardening of the lens, and so the muscle just has trouble bending it. So it's sort of like it's a give or take. Either you lose if you lose distance, or you gain distance at my age, you're probably going to lose up close because it's your ability to bend that lens is limited. And
you're at.
I'm wondering, does the lens, is there a way that you think the lens is going to improve? Like from red light, could we actually soften the lens, or once that damage has occurred, we're not going to help it? And it's more about just keeping our eye muscles strong so that we can focus better.
Well, it's certainly the case that the red light is not just about vision. Okay, so stuff which isn't published yet is showing that grip strength improves quite markedly. We know that
You
flies
mean
and
with your
bees,
hands?
yeah, when you do that, yeah, and you grip something. We know that flies and bees move a lot more easily. Now, when it comes to your lens, yes, you will almost certainly have an impact on the muscles regulating the lens. But you've got a bit of an uphill struggle here because the lens itself is changing independently and it becomes stiffer and it becomes harder and it changes its color. It becomes a bit brown. And I have no evidence to say that red light will change the lens. I mean,
Okay.
lots of things come out of the wash and I go, I wasn't expecting that. However, I don't have any ability to predict that that would improve, not the lens itself, but the muscles around the lens. Yes. You know, the effect is terribly general. Um, here's me shining light on one part of the body and I'm finding effects all over the place.
Yeah,
Um,
well, that's mitochondria, right?
yeah, they talk to one another. They talk to
Yeah.
one another all the time. And
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm glad. It makes me smile to hear you say that because I think a lot of people think I'm crazy when I say that you can actually talk to, whether it's your mitochondria or the combination of discussing things with the cells around your body, they're all listening. Like
yeah,
with the
yeah.
plasma membrane and the cytoskeleton. I mean, the way the whole thing works together is incredibly complicated. But that's one of the things I've been writing. So I'll share with you after this call, and maybe we could do a follow-up call because I'd love. It seems like you're the exact right person to speak to about. I've been working on this model, a consciousness model called the C4 model, and it's about cellular consciousness, cognitive control, and this came about as I did a deep dive into. I started with the mitochondria, and I read a lot of Nick Lane's books
Mm,
and started reading all these papers from guys like Martin Picard, who I've chatted with a few times, and then I started getting into some really deep stuff on cytoplasm and cytoskeleton and how the whole the origin of organelles and cells and how everything came together. And I sort of started looking at, well, we started with the billions of years of single cells, and then they started multiplying and deciding to coordinate first just in clusters, like you could imagine like a group of algae talking to each other, and they learned that it's beneficial to communicate with one cell next to each other. And then eventually we started seeing these multi-celled organisms. And so I look at the system, our body, as being basically like a giant biological supercomputer with, all these cells sort of working independently, but also working together and communicating, whether it's neurochemically or electrically. And now we're starting to see that there's actually like biophoton communication, perhaps going through our vagus nerve system and like fiber optic cables. And so when you get down to it, what I sort of concluded is the mitochondria, are in all these cells, and there's just, like there's trillions and trillions and trillions or quadrillions of them. And if you could improve their health, they're going to do their job better in every cell in your body and make every organ work better and make your ability. And like, what are we at our essence? We are basically pattern recognition seeking machines. And so we want to take in information, work with it, process it, and try to make better decisions. And that takes energy. So if you could up your energy and your ability to, the more you can sense and process and work with your environment, the better the outcomes you're going to make, right? And that obviously extends beyond just health and longevity, but to like financial decisions, economic decisions, political decisions. When people are low on energy, mental energy, they just default and often to things that don't make much sense, right?
yeah, well, I definitely. Okay, so we're definitely in agreement. I mean, there's masses of communication across the body, and many of those we don't know anything about. If I improve mitochondria in your right finger, the rest of your body, mitochondria know about it, and they click into place with what's happened in your finger. Uh, out there, we knew this some time ago, but we weren't ready to digest that information. There's some great stuff done by John Mitrofanis from Australia, where he's shown that red light can ameliorate the impact of Parkinson's disease. and he went off, and Parkinson's disease starts as disease deep in the brainstem, a long way down in there. And he actually ended up showing that you can shine red light on the abdomen and on the leg, and you got improvement if you got the disease at the right state. And it's all about mitochondrial communication. So one of our jobs is going to be to find out how is that message communicated. So we know that red light exposure to one bit of the body results in big changes in circulating cytokines. Now, I think that's really interesting. It's a means of communication, but I don't think it's the only one. I think there are other things going on that we've got absolutely no idea about. So yes, communication.
You mean
And then
communication
yes,
methods?
sorry?
You mean communication methods, other communication methods between
Yeah.
mitochondria?
Yeah. Other communicate. What are mitochondria are just not using one postal system. They're probably using a whole load of different systems we don't know about. We've got very little idea. The other point that you raise about cognitive ability, absolutely. Now, I'm crawling my way up from vision to hand grips, to mobility. How long can you stand on one leg with your eyes closed? That's a really good one. Changes a lot with age. It's a motor task. It's a vestibular task. And we can affect that. But can we use this to increase cognitive power? I'm sitting here. I was originally kind of a bit of a refusenik about this. I'm not at all. I think we can use it to do that. But what we've got to do is we've got to get the question right. What is the question we want? Is that question doing your 17 times table backwards? I don't know. It may not work for everything, but that's the ability to improve cognitive performance, I am convinced, is down there. And the other point that you touched on which, again, I was something of a refusenik, is biophotons. When someone came to me and said, it was the same guy, John Mitrofanis, came along and said, I'm finding these biophotons. We'd had a couple of glasses of wine, and I said, this is just ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Glenn had to eat his words yet again. And, I examined a PhD thesis 6-7 months ago from an absolutely brilliant student. And she'd gone down deep in the ground, and she'd shown that two cells communicated between one another. And I looked at it and I thought, this is absolutely great. Now, John, who is now currently in Grenoble, is doing exactly the same kind of thing. And there's no doubt biophotons exist. And there's no doubt that they carry a level of communication that's telling cells something. I think it's telling cells things ain't looking good. Brace yourself for a problem. So, yeah, how many other forms of communication are there? Absolutely no idea.
Well, it's funny, I with the model, I sort of look at our high level conscious awareness. It's sort of being akin to like what's trending on Twitter or social media. It's what our cells are sort of most excited about and bringing to the high level attention to have this conference room up here about what's going on in the body. But, just like there's 8.5 billion people on the planet, and they're communicating with all the, whether it's email or snail mail or broadcast messages, sending packages around. That's what's happening in our body, and we're completely unaware of a lot of the decisions that we're making. They're made in the body ahead of time, and we're getting alerted. And so one of the things I theorized in the model was that, how people look for things like, oh, it's the amygdala. Like everyone was looking for years, for decades, for centuries, and theorizing about it for thousands of years. What controls the focus of, what makes us look here or look there or decide to shift our focus? And it's a powerful question, right? Like what was it? Oh, it's the prefrontal cortex. Oh, it's the amygdala. Oh, it's the brainstem. And then I'm like, it just kind of dawned on me that what it is, it's a fractal. And just like if you imagine a crowded room and one cluster of people starts getting really excited and loud, the rest of the room quiets down and looks and goes, what's going on over there? And so when we cut our finger or we get a burn, amplitude and frequency of the signal, right? Just like all cells in their early days, they're attracted to energy. So whether it's you see a bright light in the sky, it gets your attention. What is that? Oh, it's lightning. Oh, there's a big bang, there's thunder. Well, when our cells get excited, an idea is formed in our subconscious, it lights up. It is like a light bulb moment that grabs the attention of more cells, more neurons, and they get together, go, let's look at this. What is so exciting over here? Let's focus on this, and let's try to connect the dots and come up with a plan here on how to work with what we've just thought about here. And it's fascinating. And I think that at the core of this, cellular health is the key to performance, because the more clarity you have of thoughts and health of cells, the better you're going to be able to work with the information you're bringing in and make sound decisions.
Yeah. I think, first of all, we've got to start moving away from dealing with cell biology or the biology of cells in small units because they're in environments. Secondly, we've got to look about how they put together, how cells put their performance together to produce the performance of the organism. So, I'm moving more and more away from looking at individual cells, individual mitochondria, and I'm asking bigger, wider questions. So, how are these guys regulating the way we age? How are these, so mitochondria regulate our blood sugars. Most of their blood sugars are used by mitochondria. We know that if you move towards diabetes, cognitive performance will suffer, right? So we've got a link between cognitive performance, mitochondria. We know one of the great papers that came out recently was in the International Space Station, when NASA published a paper saying, I forgot the exact title, it's something like, we have a mitochondrial problem on the space station. Look at the environment. It's hard white LEDs, right? So you've got these super fit people constantly being monitored, and they're picking up this problem. Okay, so do we want our astronauts who have to make key decisions and have to keep thinking all the time, do we want to have their performance undermined by the wrong kind of lighting that's affecting their mitochondria? We know LEDs have got a big blue spike in them. We know that big blue spike at around 420 nanometers, mitochondria slow down. They just physically slow down. You produce less ATP. So think about cognitive performance, think about light, think about our kids in schools. So if we want our kids in schools to perform relatively well, we've got to think about lighting. I was lucky. I went to an old Victorian school with vast big windows in it. It was cold in winter, but vast big windows with acres of sunlight coming in. It's rare to find that now. New schools, lighting is very, very restricted, and lighting is cheap. They go for the cheapest possible option. That will have a profound effect in the long run.
Well, and another big area to focus on, and one that I feel like a lot of people aren't properly compensated for, industries and society doesn't treat people well enough, in my mind, that have to work night shifts. And getting turned upside down, and all the effects of not being able to follow a circadian rhythm and get sufficient daylight, it's a huge factor on people's health. And I've got friends that are first responders, police, firefighters, and even myself, when I was in school, I actually tried to work the night shift for a while at a gas station and just go to morning classes. And I found a bit of a struggle with it as well, just trying to keep focused and trying to have naps in the afternoon. And I found I was sleeping in sort of two chunks in order to get enough sleep every day. And it messes with your system.
Completely. I wish we could find something to disagree about here, but
Yeah.
I'm in complete agreement with you. That we need to treat light and bodies really, if we're going to get anywhere, in a more holistic manner. And light's played a role for billions of years, so why should it change now? It's changing for the organism because we're putting people in buildings, we're giving them small windows, we're giving them windows where the infrared light is blocked so that we can control the temperature inside the building, etc., and it's building a bigger and bigger problem. And remember, our lighting only really changed in, probably around 2005, 2010, when the incandescent bulbs slowly started to go out. Incandescent bulbs are fantastic. Their light that comes out of them is like sunlight. It's something that's heating up. So, Christmas presents for my relatives have been light bulbs recently. And that's fine. They're all ticking along okay. My lighting in my office is incandescent light bulbs. In my lab, it's incandescent light bulbs. And we finished a study recently, which will be in press in about a week's time, where we went into a building, a UCL building with hard LEDs, no windows. And we tested people's visual performance, and we just gave them incandescent light bulbs to supplement their lighting. Really big improvement. Very big improvement. A big improvement except in one guy. We thought, we've got improvements, everything. Why is this one guy? And he said he was a vegetarian. And then we stupidly, shows how scientists fail to think, we stupidly thought, what's vegetarianism got to do with colour perception? Which is rubbish. Of course, it has absolutely nothing to do with it. But we found out he had incandescent light bulbs at home and he didn't really know it because he hadn't put his hand on them. So he already was pumped up. So simply changing the light bulbs can have a very big effect. A positive.
Have you looked at all at, is there, I always, my background in large part has also been investing. So I always, when I have these light bulb moments where I'm like, okay, well, who's making an efficient incandescent? Is there such a thing that we could, using new materials or, have you found anything like that yet?
No, not really. Not at the moment, but I think there'll be a drive for that. But one of the things you can do, okay, just to make life simple, is if you go and get a 100-watt incandescent light bulb, which is really bright, and get a dimmer switch, right? And you put it through a dimmer switch and you turn the power right down so that it's comfortable to read by. Not only then will you have a light which produces all the right wavelengths in it, but you'll have a light that'll last for years. Because the old argument about the incandescent light bulbs is they burn out and you've got to keep replacing them. Well, not if you take a powerful bulb and you turn it right down. And that's what I have around me here.
So you get a high wattage bulb, turn it down, and it lasts a long, long time because it's got strength.
So one of my colleagues did that with some halogens in his kitchen, and and I said, well, how long have you done that? And he said, oh, it's been about 8 years. He said, I haven't replaced anything. And when you think about halogen bulbs and incandescent light bulbs, remember this, your society may take them away from you, but there are some places where it can't take them away from you. You cannot put an LED light in an oven. It'll melt. So there are some places where you have to have, countries still have to have halogen stroke incandescent light bulbs for certain purposes. I'm not suggesting
so
stick your head in the
halogen works
oven.
as well.
Yeah, they're both fundamentally the same. In terms of their light output.
I mean, halogen's much more efficient than incandescent, and I actually have a lot of halogen bulbs that I put in years ago at my cottage. And I barely ever had to replace a light bulb. The electrician convinced me to spend more money on them because they lasted so long back then.
Yeah, fine. And you want to get them to last longer? Put a dimmer switch in.
Yeah, well, I usually keep them dimmed down. I like to dim them down in the evening because I've read all this stuff about, circadian rhythm and about lowering light levels, increasing your melatonin production, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That's what we should be doing. We don't need to go to super advanced technology. We should go for a walk in the mornings, and we need halogen light bulbs, in our houses in the evenings.
And so maybe another question. Do you ever get into, I've read that they've just figured out that our skin produces its melanin, which also boosts mitochondria. It's like our skin acts like a solar panel, produces melanin, and that circulates in the body.
Well, melanin or melatonin?
I think it's melanin that.
Yeah, well, melanin is produced in your skin and provides skin pigmentation. There's been a lot of work recently that's been quite surprising from the States, showing that mitochondria are packed with melatonin, which everybody thinks comes from the pineal gland in your brain and regulates your sleep patterns. In actual fact, the vast majority of this is actually in your mitochondria, because your mitochondria can produce a lot of reactive oxygen species, which is
Hmm.
pro-inflammatory. And they've got this vast pool, which, of melatonin, which is there simply to stop the inflammation from happening. And uh, that actually has been really, really exciting.
And
So,
it seems like that melatonin levels are key for mitophagy.
they, I don't know the full extent of what they do. This door opened in the last few years.
Mhm.
And for all the years we've been doing all this complex biochemistry on mitochondria, biochemistry I don't even understand. We haven't gone very far. We haven't gone very far at all. Walk away and ask a different group of people to look at the problem, and they see it in a different light. So I'm not by any means undermining what the biochemists have done. And the biochemists have done a lot to understand what goes on in mitochondria. But what is the place of mitochondria in the world? That's kind of a different question. And one of the key players in that was Nick Lane. Nick Lane did actually say, hang on, there are wider issues there. And certainly with some of my graduate students, one of the first things I do is I give them, a copy of his book, Power, Sex and Suicide.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just always a little bit of a surprise. But a great intro to the bigger pictures in mitochondria.
It's fascinating. I mean, I went through I think three Nick Lane books, but and I struggled through them because and I found that I was, I mean, thank God for AI and Google.
Yeah,
I could poke around and dig deeper into some of the things I don't understand and connect the dots. But I just found the whole thing fascinating, and especially when you start looking at um, one of the things that I explored is how trauma and epigenetics relates to mitochondria as well, perhaps, because when you have a spike of energy and this huge neurochemical flow, it seems like that's when the body is sort of saying, let's remember everything that's happening here and store this information so that we are wired to either avoid it or try to repeat it. If it's something really good or something really bad happens to us. And then we have this cell level triggering where a certain smell, sound, if you start getting them together, you're like, I don't feel so good about this, right? It's
yeah,
it's it's
yeah.
it's literally at the cell level, this wiring, right, where the whole body knows, and uh, that learning how to try to reprogram that is one of the things that I'm interested in, because I look at epigenetics like as if it's firmware software at the very low level of our system, right? If we're constantly getting triggered by little things and it's distracting us from what we should be focusing on, wouldn't it be nice to be able to try to, heal that trauma, or at least, and at the same time, try to control so that we're not just overly attracted to things that we're addicted to?
Yeah, yeah. Rewiring, changing. So one area no one's moved on is, if you think about rewiring, changing, neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity absorbs energy. As you get older,
Mhm.
you've got less ATP, you've got less energy. And one of my dream kind of things for, maybe when I retire, is to play around in that area. How much can we I know we can change in insects, we can change, improve memories in flies. We can take old flies and we can put them down a tube and they run towards a light, which is absolutely great. And then halfway down the tube, we can put a pool of quinine, and they go, oh, hate it, absolutely hate it. Young flies then will never go down that tube again. Old flies keep going down and keep going down, and they make the mistake. If we give those old flies a burst of red light, their error rates drop significantly. So somehow now they've started to remember. Have we rewired something? What have we done there? So there's this big thing which you alluded to previously: cognition,
Yeah.
memory, and learning. Can we change memory and learning by changing a light bulb, or just getting rid of the horrible light bulb that you've got in there anyway? I'm if you said, Glenn, you'll be saying this in 5 years' time, I'd have been ashamed of myself. I'm not now.
Well, I did a deep dive into mitochondrial health, and then because I realized something was wrong with me in my retirement, I'd sort of gotten used to, the comfort foods and lazing around a bit too much, and I've always had a tendency to get on a computer or get into books and just be too sedentary, right? Not, read and sit and whatever. And then I also was reading up on how what a factor the microbiome is, with all the different neurochemical effects that your diet, I started to realize, was much more than just food. And that, my high sugar, and a little bit excessive alcohol on the weekends, and a few too many glasses of wine with dinner on a regular basis had me in a state of, basically, realized I was hypoglycemic. I
Hmm.
was probably on the spectrum of pre-diabetes, and I was experiencing metabolic dysfunction. And I felt like I had mitochondria dysfunction. So I tried to do every single protocol at the same time: sauna, red light therapy, cold plunging. I changed my diet, and I did this microbiome reset. I did all these different things, as well as respecting the circadian rhythm. And you know, I just felt in a matter of weeks, unbelievable change in my ability to focus and concentrate. Within 6 months, the sharpness and the energy that I felt and the mood improvements, it's like I could look at the worst times in my life and I could say, if you sleep in, especially in my teenage years or during some times of depression I had, if you sleep in, you avoid the light, you don't eat right, you go for these sugary quick fixes to get a little serotonin hit and a dopamine. It's a recipe for depression. But when you eat right, exercise, and do all these protocols for health, including getting up in the morning and getting that early light, it's a recipe for a co-vitality spiral that takes you higher, makes you stronger and smarter.
But certainly exercise, mitochondria respond positively to exercise. And that is very, very clear. We know that exercise stimulates mitochondria. I'm beginning to suspect that things like exercise actually change the phenotype of some of the mitochondria we're producing. Not quite sure how, it's something we're investigating at the moment, but exercise is big, very
What
big.
does that mean, change the phenotype?
It okay. Change the type of mitochondria we're. Can we produce a more resilient form of mitochondria? So mitochondria are dividing and fusing all the time. Their rates of division and their rates of fusing can change depending on exercise. Exercise, you
Hmm.
need more energy, so you get a change in your mitochondria. Can we make, under certain circumstances, a different type of mitochondria that are more resilient? And here's the other, look at it on the other side of the page, which is, can we also make a form of mitochondria that are less than perfect? So why do we find people, for instance, with Parkinson's disease, which is a disease classically thought of as confined to one very, very small part of the brain, a minute part of the brain, why do we find some of these people get abnormalities of smell? Why do these people get other
Hmm.
abnormalities? And I think part of the reason for that is we know these mitochondria are talking to one another, so maybe sick mitochondria in one part of the body are influencing the health negatively in another part of the body. Um, the data are there. Clearly, there are changes beyond what one would expect when you have a disease that has a focal center.
One of my best friends got diagnosed with Parkinson's at a young age, at 40, and I've done a lot of research, looking at potential ways to improve his lifestyle and trying to look for a cure. And I'm excited that there seems to be some good developments coming along down the pipe on that, but it's still early days on a lot of them. And it seems though, like like whether it's misfolded proteins and inflammation in the brain. I've noticed that with Parkinson's patients, they often have trouble sleeping, and the
Yep.
shortness. They feel rested, but they might only be sleeping 4 or 5 hours a day. And I think that that is a big part of the cycle that leads to the neurodegenerative diseases, is not getting it, not doing the full rinse of getting that, uh, using our brains. What do you call it? the drainage system. We have a lymphatic drainage system in the
Oh,
brain, and that we
lymphatic
have to,
drainage. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
if we don't do that sleep cycle and get rid of those toxins, we get cell degradation, and we're not getting. I guess maybe ask this question: do you ever think about the mitochondria sleep cycle, and when you're asleep, what happens? I sort of like to describe it as like the cells when you wake up, it's like your cells are all like all hands on deck, and the mitochondria are like, what is, let's all pay attention to what, so we can navigate this world and make sure that, they're focused externally. And then when we're asleep, it's like, oh, thank God he's asleep. We can now tidy up the house, and let's
Yeah.
clean up and
Yeah. In general principle, I'm in agreement with you. We know mitochondrial function peaks in the morning. In the morning, when you wake up, you produce more ATP than you do at any other time of the day. Your hormones are changing. And I think I put a lot of that down, and that's true if you're a fly, or it's true if you're a human. I think a lot of that is down to the fact that when you wake up, you're vulnerable. You're very vulnerable, because predators could have been looking at you.
Mhm.
So you want to wake up, you want to be ready to run. Okay, so in the mornings, your mitochondria are working super hard. You're producing loads of ATP. In the afternoon, and your analogy is similar to my analogy, I think in the afternoon they're doing the housework.
Mhm.
They're just not, things are ticking over. And so that's that's the time at which a red light is really important, when the mitochondria are already in a dynamic state and are happy to be shifted, happy to be accelerated. Um, so yeah, time of day. Now, what do mitochondria do at night? Great question. In reality, I can make up loads of stories. In reality, I don't know. And someone will probably find out, but I just hope it's in my lifetime.
It seems like they must, intuitively, you're sort of like, I think they sort of sleep in shifts. They enter mitophagy in shifts. And that's why when you wake up to, use the bathroom in the night, if you're older, you have a bit of a fog. And sometimes I wake up, I'm like, where the hell am I? Which, if I've been
Yeah,
traveling,
yeah,
and it
yeah,
takes time for you to kind of regain focus.
yeah. So yeah, I don't know anything about what happens at night. Um, we looked at fusion and fission in mitochondria. It was a big study, and we published it. And I was very pleased with it. And then we went back and we said, yeah, okay, we did all that at 11 o'clock in the morning. What would happen if we did that at 2:15? And then you get faced with the thing is, oh my God, we can't do this, because we'd have to do it every 5 minutes to get a global picture of what's going on. So whereas that's a very, very good question, it's an unrealistic, well, it might be realistic if you've
Mhm.
got vast resources. It's an unrealistic kind of thing. We have measured ATP at different times of the day. Um, but for that, kind of a couple of postdocs had to sit in the lab for 24 hours, and we could only do it in flies and kill flies every hour. But it needs much more investigation, much more. I'm just looking at their ATP production. That's just mitochondria do more than produce energy, a lot more. So they're doing loads of other things, and until we know all the other things and the temporal sequence in which they're doing all the other things, we're never going to get the full story. And that's not, sadly, I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime.
But the big takeaway here, I guess, for this podcast would be new studies on red light. We understand how important it is for mitochondrial health, not just for vision, but probably for every organ in the body, as well as cognitive performance. It's likely, the better you take care of your mitochondria, and red light is a key way to reduce inflammation. There was also a bit about lowering glucose levels, right? Just
Yeah,
from
yeah,
red light.
yeah, yeah. Very, very clear. We did it in bees, we did it in humans. Give people a burst of red light, give them a standard glucose tolerance test. Your blood glucose does not peak to the same extent. That is very clear. We did that in normal subjects. A colleague of mine is doing it in type diabetes. Data I've seen looks identical in type 2 diabetes as it does in normal people.
And this would work. this would be something that would work even if a patient's lying in bed. You've obviously excluded the fact that someone gets up and goes for a walk in the morning. Obviously, that helps their glucose levels as well. But in clinical studies, you've seen just red light drops glucose levels.
No, I've not seen it in clinical studies. I've only seen it in normal type 2 diabetics.
Okay.
I have got very little doubt. I mean, one of the clinicians came to us from critical care and said one of my critical care problems is diabetes. Um, and so, they want to set up red lights in critical care with one of the metrics being diabetes. I would be surprised if it doesn't produce a positive result. I mean, everything else is saying that that's the right move, right direction of movement. And we know that people that spend more time outside have much better control of their insulin than people who spend their time inside. All the population data and the experimentation all point firmly in the same direction.
Which always begs the question, I mean, you go down this rabbit hole of health and you start seeing all these different things. And you could say clearly there's all, we should take better care of ourselves. And we know there's all different ways to do it, whether it's exercise or get out. But it always goes back to me is why don't we do it? What's stopping us? And that gets back to the programming and the wiring, right?
Why don't we do it? We don't do it because humans and most animals suffer from inertia. It's called cognitive dissonance. We know we shouldn't smoke because it's bad for us, but a lot of people still smoke. We shouldn't drink.
It's a short-term hit, right?
Pardon?
It's often that we go for the short-term hit, the cheap way to get some serotonin and dopamine, and we don't think counterintuitively. Like learning for me to get off my desk and not go have a coffee with sugar, or a croissant, and instead thinking that what I actually need is to get on an exercise bike or go for a quick walk to recharge my battery brain. It's totally counterintuitive,
Yeah, and then you say, I'll start tomorrow. So,
often the case. Anyway, I really appreciate your time. It's a great pleasure chatting with you.
Okay, well, look, very happy to chat anytime. Very much enjoyed it. Try and find something that we can disagree about and we can have an argument. But I think we're rather well tuned to one another.
All right, I'll let you go.
Here
Thanks very much. Well, thanks very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I learned a lot. I'm going to put this into practice. I want to get those early morning rays, especially. Stay on that trend, circadian rhythm. Stay healthy. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Like and subscribe if you did.